The night air was crisp, the scent of damp leaves thick in the breeze. Ethan leaned over the rusted water fountain, pressing the button until a thin stream trickled out. He let the cool water fill his mouth, swallowing quickly before wiping his sleeve across his lips. It was the last football game of the season, and he, James, Tyler, and Nicky D had ditched early to hang out behind the school, where the old chain-link fence separated the grounds from the dense tree line. "Man, it's dead out here," Tyler muttered, kicking a crushed soda can across the cracked pavement. The distant roar of the stadium crowd drifted on the wind, but out here, it was just them, the faint buzz of the street lamp above, and the endless stretch of woods beyond the fence. Ethan exhaled, his breath fogging in the chill. He glanced toward the trees absently, then stopped. A figure stood at the edge of the woods, just beyond the fence. Too still, too silent, too wrong. His stomach tightened as he tried to make sense of it. It wasn't a passerby, it wasn't a jogger. It didn't even seem to move. No shifting weight, no adjusting posture. Just a silhouette fixed in place, watching. "Dude, check this out," Ethan said, forcing out a half-laugh. "Tell me that's not the creepiest thing you've ever seen." James turned first, then Tyler, then Nicky D. Silence. Ethan swallowed hard. "Okay, what the hell?" The figure turned and walked away. Not toward the street, not toward the school, just back into the trees. The four of them stood frozen, watching it vanish into the shadows. Then Tyler, voice hushed, said what they were all thinking. "You guys saw that too, right?" Nods. Slow, uncertain. And just like that, Ethan knew. He wasn't crazy. Something was watching them. And it wasn't alone. The town of Ravenshade had never been one for grand Valentine's Day celebrations. Unlike the bustling cities adorned with flashing heart-shaped neon signs and extravagant proposals, Ravenshade kept its traditions simple: homemade cards, quiet dinners, and the occasional bouquet of roses from the lone flower shop on Main Street. But this year, something felt different. There was a chill in the air that wasn't just from the February wind. A lingering sense of unease wrapped itself around the town like a dense fog, whispering in the ears of those who paid attention. For Charlotte Hayes, the small town had always been her home. She had grown up wandering its narrow streets, listening to the rhythmic chime of the church bell every hour, and savoring the warmth of the local cafe where she now worked. At 28, she was content, even if life had settled into a predictable routine. Each day started with a morning shift at Rosie's Cafe, followed by a long walk past the town's oldest bookstore, and an evening spent in her modest apartment above the bakery. Life was quiet, peaceful, safe. But safety was an illusion in Ravenshade. It had been 3 days since the first disappearance. Mark Ellis, a local mechanic, hadn't shown up for work. At first, people assumed he had left town. He had always talked about moving somewhere warmer after all. But then came the second disappearance. Jennifer Cole, a young woman who worked at the florist, vanished without a trace. Her car was still parked outside her apartment, her phone left on the kitchen counter as if she had stepped away for just a moment. Whispers spread through the town like wildfire. The police assured everyone that they were investigating, but the lack of answers only deepened the fear. People locked their doors earlier, kept a watchful eye on strangers, and avoided walking alone at night. Charlotte tried to shake the feeling of unease that gnawed at the back of her mind. Maybe it was just paranoia, fed by the eerie quiet that had settled over Ravenshade. Maybe it was the way the wind howled at night, rattling her windows as if trying to get in. Or maybe it was the letter that had arrived at the cafe that morning, addressed to her in looping cursive, sealed with a red wax heart. It contained only 3 words: "Be my Valentine." The wind had settled into a steady whisper, moving through the ruins of what had once been a place of unseen horrors. The house, now hollow and empty, stood as a silent monument to the past, its secrets buried beneath layers of time and decay. Daniel and Evelyn stood side by side at the edge of the overgrown yard, gazing at the skeletal remains of the place that had nearly taken their lives. The terror had passed, but the weight of the truth still clung to them. Evelyn clutched the old tattered notebook, the one they had found in the hidden compartment beneath the floorboards, its pages filled with desperate scrawlings from decades past. The final entry read, "It's not the house. It's the thing inside it. And it's still waiting." A shiver ran through Evelyn, but she exhaled slowly, letting the cool morning air soothe her frayed nerves. "We should go," she murmured. Daniel nodded. "Yeah, we should." With one last glance at the house, they turned away. The town would forget, as it always did. The past would blur into folklore, and the story of what happened here would become just another ghost tale whispered in dimly lit rooms. But they knew the truth. As they walked toward the car, the wind stirred again, rattling the brittle branches of the trees. And somewhere deep within the empty corridors of the house, something shifted. Something patient. Something that had all the time in the world. The wind outside howled like a wounded animal, rattling the windows of the decrepit mansion. Inside, Daniel stood frozen, his breath coming in sharp, shallow gasps as the truth settled over him like a burial shroud. The whispers hadn't been in his head. The flickering shadows weren't tricks of the failing candlelight. The house itself was breathing, watching, waiting. His trembling fingers traced the outline of the old journal he had discovered, its leather cover cracked and stained with something dark. The last entry sent ice through his veins. He watches from the walls, he listens through the floors, and when he steps into the light, it is already too late. A floorboard groaned behind him. Slowly, he turned, the candle trembling in his grip. At the far end of the hallway, where the darkness stretched endlessly, a figure emerged. It wasn't walking. It wasn't moving at all. And yet, with every blink, it was closer. Daniel's heartbeat pounded in his ears. The figure had no discernible face, only the vague impression of eyes. Eyes that absorbed the candlelight instead of reflecting it. It stood motionless, head tilting slightly, as if studying him. Then, without a sound, it opened its mouth. No voice, no words, just an empty, gaping void that seemed to pull the air from the room. The candle went out. Darkness swallowed everything. And Daniel screamed. Long after they had gone, in the dead silence of the house, a single creaking sound echoed from the darkness, a door slowly opening on its own.